Hi, and welcome to Fairy Tale Flip. I'm Donna Fields, and I have the pleasure of sharing a podcast with Vanessa Y. Rogers, in which we find the hidden meanings behind fairy tales. Every month, Vanessa and I read 3 fairy tales and let you vote on the one we're going to dive in and explore. You'll find the first 2 on YouTube. Just do a search for The Water of Life and The Donkey Skin, read by Vanessa Y. Rogers. And now I'm going to read the 3rd one, A Flowering Tree. This is an abbreviated version of the tale from India. The full story can be found at the link that I will put in the description. Let us know any questions you have. You ready for A Flowering Tree? Sit back and relax. In a certain town, the king had 2 daughters and a son. The older daughter was married. In the same town, there lived an old woman with her 2 daughters. She did menial jobs to feed and clothe and bring up her children. When the girls reached puberty, the younger sister said one day, "Sister, I've been thinking of something. It's hard on Mother to work all day for our sakes. I want to help her. I will turn myself into a flowering tree. You can take the flowers from the tree and sell them for good money. First, sweep and wash the entire house. Then take a bath, go to the well, and bring back 2 full pitchers of water. I will sit under this tree and meditate. I want you to pour water from this pitcher all over my body. I'll turn into a flowering tree. Then you can pluck as many flowers as you want, but do it without breaking a sprout or tearing a leaf. When you're done, pour the water from the other pitcher over me, and I'll become a person again." So the older sister poured water from the first pitcher all over her sister. At once, her sister changed into a beautiful tree that seemed to have a flower next to every leaf. The older sister plucked the flowers carefully without hurting a stalk or sprout or leaf. After she had enough to fill a basket or 2, she emptied the second pitcher of water over the tree, and the tree became human again, and the younger sister stood in its place. She shook the water from her hair and stood up. They both gathered the flowers in baskets and brought them home. The flowers had a wonderful fragrance. They wove them into garlands. "Where shall we sell them?" asked the elder sister. "Sister, why not take all of them to the king's palace? They will pay you well. Mother is always doing awful jobs for our sake. Let's pile up some money and surprise her." So the older sister took the basketful of garlands before the king's palace and hawked her wares, crying, "Flowers, flowers, who wants flowers?" The queen bought the flowers and asked for more the next day, and this continued for many days. One day the king's son saw the flowers. They smelled wonderful. He had never seen such flowers anywhere. "What flowers are these? Where do they grow? On what kind of tree?" He watched the girl who brought the flowers, and one day he followed her home, and he hid himself in a tall tree in front of the house and watched. He saw how the sisters made the flowers and decided he had to have the younger sister as his bride. He told the king and queen, and a marriage was arranged. The family made ritual designs on the wedding floor as large as the sky and built a canopied ceremonial tent as large as the earth. All the relatives arrived. At an auspicious moment, the girl, who knew how to become a flowering tree, was given in marriage to the prince. After a nuptial ceremony, the families left the couples together alone in a separate house. "You know how to turn into a flowering tree, don't you? Let me see you do it. We can then sleep on the flowers and cover ourselves with them. That would be lovely," the prince told his new bride. "My lord, I'm not a demon. I'm not a goddess. I'm an ordinary mortal like everyone else." "Can a human being become a tree?" "I don't like all this lying and cheating. I saw you the other day becoming a beautiful tree. I saw you with my own eyes. If you don't become a tree for me, who will you do it for?" So she agreed. She instructed him on how and when to pour the water while she sat in the middle of the room meditating. So the prince poured 1 pitcher full of water over her. She turned into a flowering tree. The fragrance of the flowers filled the house. He plucked the flowers he wanted very carefully and then sprinkled the water from the 2nd pitcher all over the tree. It became his bride again. She shook her tresses and stood up smiling. They spread the flowers, covered themselves with them, and went to bed. They did this again and again for many days. The prince's sister, his younger sister, wanted some of the flowers that the prince threw out of his window every day. She discovered the secret of the flowering tree and decided she wanted some fresh flowers of her own. So she convinced her mother, the queen, to let her take the new princess to the orchard with some of her friends from the court. Once in the orchard, she insisted that the younger sister become a flowering tree and give her flowers. "Sister-in-law, you can become a flowering tree. Look, no one here has flowers for her hair." The sister-in-law replied angrily, "Cheh, you're awful. By coming here, it was a mistake." But then she agreed to become a tree. She sent for 2 pitchers of water, uttered chants over them, instructed the girls on how and when to pour the water, and then sat down to meditate. The silly girls didn't listen carefully. They poured the water on her indifferently here and there. She turned into a tree, but only half of a tree. It was already evening, and it began to rain with thunder and lightning. In her greed to get the flowers, the younger sister and the other friends tore up the sprouts and broke the branches. They were in a hurry to get home. So they poured the 2nd pitcher of water at random and ran away. When the princess changed from a tree to a person again, she had no hands and no feet. She had only half a body. She was a wounded carcass. A farmer found her half body in a ditch and brought her to a nearby town and then left her by the well. Meanwhile, when the king's daughter went home, the queen asked her, "Where's your sister-in-law? What will your brothers say?" The girl answered casually, "Who knows? Didn't we all find our way home? Who knows where she went?" The queen was very upset, and her son came to find out where his new wife was. The queen didn't know. "Oh, something terrible has happened to her," thought the prince. He went and lay down in grief. 5 days passed, 6 days passed, 15 days passed, but there was no news of his wife. They couldn't find her anywhere. Meanwhile, the girl, who was now a thing, somehow reached the town in which her husband's elder sister had been given in marriage. And every time the palace servants and maids passed that way to fetch water, they used to see her. They would say to each other, "She glows like the king's daughter." Then one of them couldn't stand it any longer and decided to tell the queen about this thing by the well. The prince's older sister brought the half-princess to her palace and recognized her. She tried to heal her, but her arms and legs did not grow. Meanwhile, the prince began looking for his wife, and he came near his elder sister's palace. And when he was brought inside, he was like a dead man. He was so consumed with grief because he wanted to find his bride that he would have nothing to do with anyone else. The queen sent maidens to his room, but he did not touch any of them. Finally, one of the servant maids got together, dressed up the thing, and then sat her at the foot of the prince's bed. That night, the thing pressed and massaged the prince's legs with a stump of her arm, and she moaned strangely. The prince got up and looked at it. It was sitting at his feet. He stared at it for a few moments and then realized it really was his long-lost wife. Then he asked her what had happened. She, who had had no language all these months, suddenly broke into words. She told him whose daughter she was, whose wife, and what had happened. "What shall we do now?" he asked. "Nothing much. We can only try. Bring 2 pitchers of water without touching them with your fingernails." So that night he brought 2 pitchers of water without anyone's knowledge. The princess uttered chants over them and instructed him. Pour the water from this pitcher over me, and I'll become a tree. Wherever there is a broken branch, set it right. Wherever a leaf is torn, put it together. Then pour the water from the second pitcher over me." Then she sat down and meditated. He poured the water on her from the first pitcher. She became a tree, but the branches had been broken, the leaves had been torn. He carefully set each one right and bound them up, and gently poured the water from the second pitcher over the tree. Now she became a whole human again. She stood up, shaking the water from her hair, and fell at her husband's feet. Then she went and woke up the queen, her sister-in-law, and touched her feet also. She told the astonished queen the whole story. The queen wept and embraced her. Then she treated the couple to all kinds of princely food and service, and had them sit in the hall like bride and bridegroom for a ritual celebration called Hase. She kept them in the palace for several weeks, and then sent them home to her father's palace with a cartload of gifts. The king was overjoyed at the return of his long-lost son and daughter-in-law. He met them at the city gates, then took them home on an elephant howdah in a grand ceremonial procession through the city streets. In the palace, they told the king and the queen everything that had happened. The king had 7 barrels of burning lime poured into a great pit and threw his youngest daughter into it. All the people who saw it said to themselves, "After all, every wrong has its punishment." So that's the story of a flowering tree. Please let us know if that's the one you want us to explore, talk about, and send in any questions you have about it, and we will use those questions as part of our discussion. And it's going to be a live episode, so please find the link below and join us for this celebration of fairy tales and their hidden meanings. Thanks. See you soon.